Coming up, the New York Football Giants finally make their defensive coordinator hire, picking up Shane Bowen, formerly of the Tennessee Titans. We break down what it means for the Big Blue defensive side of the ball, the changes to the scheme, and whether or not there could be some free agents coming out of Tennessee and making their way to Big Blue. We dive in coming up next. Yes, my friends, it is OGP, the One Giant podcast, where you know that we are your hosts, one and only right now, Adam Armack, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets over on the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie, as well as your New Jersey Devils on the Devils Puck Luck podcast with Danny McDonough. Diving in, obviously, on the final, the critical, the moment we've been waiting for the New York Football Giants this offseason, replacing Wink Martindale and getting a defensive coordinator into that role. 8 interviews Brian Daboll went through at a minimum when it comes to candidates that he was hoping to bring in, trying to figure out the right fit. And we'll talk about what hopefully was the critical component inside of this interview process for the third-year New York Giants head coach. We'll also break down where the scheme comes together here for Shane Bowen, what some of the key stats are coming out of Tennessee, what the Giants were running and what they will be running going forward into 2024. We also let you know that today's episode is going to be brought to you by Manscaped. You can go over to manscaped.com right now and use promo code OGP24 and get 20% off your order with free shipping as well. More about our title sponsor a little bit later on in the episode. But for now, Shane Bowen comes in here, and we now have our defensive coordinator. So we can take the big step back from saying, well, you had guys coming in, you had Wilson on the radar, you had internal candidates as well. But ultimately, the question was this patience, or were we moving towards panic? And then once the hire gets made, once the interview process is complete, this is kind of, I think, the nature of it. You're concerned, you're seeing names come off the board, you're feeling like there are viable candidates that are out there on the coaching landscape. And as your team doesn't make the move, you keep thinking, and the Giants have been through this before, right? They've waited too long and ended up with Jason Garrett as your offensive coordinator on his staff, right? You've maybe waited too long and ended up with Joe Judge as your head coach. So being proactive in this process really matters. And then the extra layer on this was Brian Daboll and how he approaches these interviews. And it's already been speculated that, among other things, most importantly, are you going to be a productive coach for our defense side of the football and help us win football games? But it's also, what are the expectations for Brian Daboll in terms of his personality and how he wants to communicate? If we're going to split hairs about whether or not coach X, Y, or Z is going to be the best for the defensive side of the ball, and we can debate that, and we'll see, because there was a lot of defensive coordinators getting hired this offseason, so we'll have comparisons in the upcoming year. But if it's all splitting hairs, relatively speaking, when you're going through the interview process, then it comes down to, listen, I'm rough around the edges. Or, listen, I am the offensive side of the football here, but there are going to be times when I'm go over and say, hey, I want to see some more pressure here. Or, hey, I want to find a way to flip the field position here. Dictating a little bit just of what are my expectations going into a game, going into a matchup, especially when you go through the week and you break down, well, where are the strengths and weaknesses, right? One of the things that we can probably do over the course of this offseason, not to reflect back on Wink Martindale too much, but just what were some of the games where when you looked across to the team on the other side and you thought about their best and worst attributes, were the Giants able to defensively expose that? Or were there times when even the most mediocre of passing attacks were able to find some air yards against them? Were there running games that typically struggled but found success against one of the weaknesses in this defense, stopping the run on a consistent basis? So these are the kind of things that you hope obviously go into this. And then we think about, what does Shane Bowen ultimately bring to the table as the defensive coordinator for the New York Football Giants? First and foremost, some nice kind of comparisons here from last season in terms of NFL ranks. And this is, by the way, while we were fond of Wink Martindale in terms of his ability to dial up blitzes, and we think that he can bring some of those difficult looks for opposing offenses to deal with, Just a reminder here, points per game for 26. We understand the tandem between offense and defense and the impact that it's going to have. Yards per game was 27th. Yards per rush allowed was 31st at 4.7. Talk about that blitz rate. Yes, very high. Second in the league, 46.6. You talk about pressure rate, 31.8. Sacks, 34. That's 28th overall in the league. You also have the total passing average yards per attempt, 10.43. That was 11th positive, but then total rushing, 27th, 10.54. So how does this compare to what Bowen is going to be bringing in the door? Well, Tennessee was a better team a year ago against in terms of points per allowed per game, 16th at 21.6. So you like getting to the middle of the pack. You also notice, by the way, and it is a big difference, 21.6, 23.9. Well, that's a field goal. It's a marginal difference, less than a field goal difference, but you can understand how impactful it's going to be on a week basis. They were also middle of the road in terms of yards per game, 18th to 335. Yards per rush allowed. This is a nice stat if you're thinking about the Giants anchored in it, having Dexter Lawrence in the middle of this defensive unit, 3.8, good for 7th, right? So the biggest difference here, though, when we talk about blitz rate and pressure rate, blitz rate 26, that's going to be for Shane Bowen and the Tennessee Titans, 20.4, even lower. 24th in the NFL. I mentioned before, 46.6 for Wink Martindale and this offense and this defensive unit. So second in the league, now 24th in the league. Why can we perceive this to be a positive thing? Probably because the other stat that you get out of these two comparisons, the pressure, 31.8, 28th in the league for the New York Football Giants last year. 31.8, 28th in the league for the Tennessee Titans last year. Now, the difference is if you're only bringing a blitz rate of 20.4%, if you're among the lowest in the league in terms of blitz percentages, then you feel like it's going to be commiserate with how the pressure goes. The other thing is a safer brand of defensive football. So you're going to try to trust, and we talked about some free agent talks in the top 50 free agents. If the Giants make some acquisitions here and improve the front seven, you're going to look there and say, hey, our defensive front immediately in the trenches, we need to rely on you. Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, right? Azeez Ojulari right now, maybe an addition here in the offseason or through the draft. You guys are going to need to find a way to at least have moderate success. Being 24th in the league in pressure rate is not a glowing statistic. But again, if you're near the backpack in terms of the blitz pressure that you're bringing, it means that ideally your linebackers, your secondary, your safeties, all the way back through this defense are going to be in a much better position to be a safeguard against big plays, explosive plays, yards after catch, right? You want to have a fundamentally sound defense. It's going to be a big shift here for the New York Football Giants defensively, and I think it's going to be a shift for the better. Now, you still have to ask the questions up front about what the role is going to look like here. Some people were already saying, well, this could be better for a Kayvon Thibodeau, not asked to drop back into coverage as much. No, that's still going to be a part of what Shane Bowen wants to do, asking those edge rushers to drop back into coverage. But again, that can be a function or a byproduct that really works for the New York Football Giants. And the other big benefit here when it comes to Shane Bowen is that you're talking about a 37-year-old coordinator. So I listen, this isn't about Wink Martindale could be good. Age doesn't really matter in regards to expectations. But I do think about younger minds in the NFL sometimes just coming in with new ideas. Now, again, that's not one-to-one. Just because you're a younger coach doesn't mean you're going to be a more innovative coach. Sometimes the best experienced coaches that have been in the league for years and years, you can look at you want to look at Belichick up in New England. You want to look at maybe Mike Tomlin, guys that find sustained success is because they make their little as they move along. But at 37 years old, Shane Bowen has been calling the defensive plays for Tennessee under Mike Vrabel. Like the fact that this is not just an elevation to a defensive coordinator role. This is a guy that was in that role, is now coming over, wasn't getting looks for head coaching jobs. Obviously, this offseason wasn't in consideration for those positions. So he's coming over with the experience, having the full control of the defensive side to make the play call. So you go back and look at what you saw in Tennessee and think that there is some sustainability and some carryover there as well. Let's talk specifically coming up here in a second about what are the expectations when we think about this defense. How is it going to impact and benefit this team? And then are there free agents from Tennessee that could be targets for the New York Football Giants? How does it impact overall who the Giants might target when it comes to this offseason? We'll get into that in just one moment. But first, we tell you about our title sponsor, Manscaped. Hey, roses are red, violets are blue. trim your balls, and your date will thank us too. Oh, that's right, fellas. You know that Valentine's Day is knocking, and Manscaped has the remedy for all of your body grooming needs. The all-new Performance Package 5.0 is designed to elevate your grooming game and shine like the heartthrob that you are. That's right, man. Come on. We're all good-looking fellas, and we want to make our ladies happy as well. You can join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com to snag 20% off and free shipping with promo code OGP24. Listen, I'm in my 30s. There was a time in my early 20s before the landscape of all the great products from Manscaped where I was maybe trying to use products that were not specifically designed for these needs. Bit of a terrifying prospect. But now we can talk about the hero of Valentine's, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It's an electric trimmer that features skin-safe technology guarding your V-Day treasure against the grooming mishaps. It also comes with a bright LED spotlight, yet it's brighter than your best romantic smile. Turn on your heart light, Neil. Perfect for precise grooming, even in the trickiest of spots. Oh, and by the way, it's also waterproof too, so you can take it in the shower, right? Get yourself scrubbed down, get yourself groomed up, and be out there ready to go. On top of which, if you're looking for maybe a little happy ending, there's the Manscaped Refined Cologne. It's Valentine's Day touch to your grooming routine. Elevate your grooming routine and set the stage for a romantically smooth celebration. You know that you can seamlessly handle even the thickest of beards. Perfect tool for a polished, date-ready appearance. That is, of course, going to be the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. This is the shave your scruffy beard, effortlessly. And it also sculpts your cheek lines and maintains a beard style, giving you the suave look for romantic moments. Oh, guys, you get 20% off. We said that at the top. And free shipping with our exclusive promo code OGP20. Manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code OGP24 because your grooming upgrade awaits, ready to charm your Valentine dates. Oh, yeah. Come on, Manscaped. Valentine's Day. Treat your ladies right. I'm about OGP 24. Let's have a good time. Now, when we think about moving forward with what does this mean, the hire of Shane Bowen for the defensive unit for the New York Football Giants, we already said. So maybe less blitzing. Maybe you want to be better in coverage. Thinking about the New York Football Giants roster from this standpoint, it's going to, first and foremost, it's going to ask more of a Dexter Lawrence. It's going to ask even more of a Kayvon Thibodeau. It's going to ask more of Azeez Ojulari if he's going to be a critical part of this unit in the short term. And then we can talk about big picture because he's going to have a contract discussion up as well. But then you get into those trenches there. I mentioned a guy like Dexter. Listen, he's been phenomenal for this team overall, but who do they need to add in free agency to make sure they strengthen the interior of that defensive line? A lot of this is going to be predicated on controlling the point of attack and then finding ways to get after and get pressure on the opposing QBs. Shut down the run first and force them into long, third and long passing down situations. Something that at times, by the way, for Wink Martindale and this defense was a struggle. Even if it was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, it didn't guarantee you that you weren't going to be giving up first a fresh set of downs, tiring out your defense, and then obviously putting your offense behind the 8 ball. This past season, injuries and otherwise created a lot of circumstances. But think about the outside, right? Deonte Banks, we love him. We think that his rookie season was very strong in spite of ending on an injury note. If you're going to trust him being out there on an island, that does afford you the ability to go on these blitz package looks and bring more pressure. But the other side is you now get to mix and match here and say, well, yeah, you're going to lock up one-on-one with the best wide receiver. But on the opposite side of the field, we can look to go into some zone defenses, right? We can say whether it's going to be edge rushers dropping back into coverage, whether we're going to look into the linebacking core and say, are we going to go ahead and use Bobby Okereke, put it up in run support? Are we going to drop him back into a zone look over the middle? Are we going to bring our safeties, whether Xavier McKinney is back in free agency or not? Pick Javarius Owens, Dane Belton, right? This crew of players on the back end and maybe added help, obviously, through the draft or free agency. If you're going to start to go to some of the zone looks, you can break down into the different areas of the defensive field and say, we can trust one of our cornerbacks right now because they're going to need help in that area as well. And on the other side, we're going to offer the help, right? Over the top help coverage here from a safety spot, maybe the linebacker drifting out into that 5 to 15 kind of zone range and creating these layers defensively that make it more difficult for the opposing QBs to be able to read and react and find where they're going to go with football. So part of me looks at the Shane Bowen hire as being, let's get back to stability. Right? We don't need to worry about sometimes when you are deficient on the defensive side of the ball, you default to not knocking Wink Martindale, but you default to. Well, if we don't have enough of the talent, sit back and trust our guys in coverage, then we got to try to bring the house. We got to try to bring pressure. But they didn't get home any more successfully than a far less heavy scheme in Shane Bowen did, running the same exact looks, right? So same exact pressure rate, in spite of doing it 20% less of the time in terms of blitz percentages. So if I think about this defense and the talent it currently has on it, what I want to build towards is saying, okay, we're going to look at this team and believe that even if we are going to give up 3 or give up 7 on a given drive, you're going to have to grind for it. You're going to have to earn it against us here, right? So the Giants try to tighten up in the red zones, try to force teams to take field goals here. But far too often, again, it was good play, big chunk play, bad, right? Decent play, big chunk play. Finding a rhythm here where, unlike last season, it seemed like it was good series, bad series, good play, bad play. You want it to be every down, every distance is going to be consistent. And I am very interested to see how this impacts a player like Bobby Okereke. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of Xavier McKinney. You see him elevated, his PFF grades, production, ends up being one of the best rated coverage and down around the line of scrimmage safeties in the league. 34th overall on the top 50 big board ESPN in terms of free agents. But Bobby Okereke is your field general. So the way in which he can communicate and hopefully get guys into the right positions is going to really matter here. And inside of that linebacking core as well, we think Micah McFadden took a big step forward here in this past season. We wonder if Darian Beavers will be back healthy and able to contribute. Then you're going to add another player in the door as well here to continue to build on what you have. In that regard, looking over into free agency, we can look at the Tennessee Titans right now and say, are there guys, right? Who is here, if anyone, that we believe the New York Football Giants could see some follower with Bowen coming to the New York Giants? So there's 2 players that first jump out to me. Think about the secondary. Obviously, Adoree Jackson likely not going to be back with this roster. You talk about having some players inside of that room that haven't performed up to snuff. You have Cordell Flott looking in the slot there, but what about Darnay Holmes? You need to find some guys that are going to come in here and be able to make some impact plays. Trey Hawkins, though, it was fun. It was fun to start. It ended up kind of where you think a late round draft pick is going to be, one of the worst coverage players in the entire league. So the Tennessee Titans have both Christian Fulton going to be coming up here for free agency, as well as Sean Bunting. Both unrestricted free agents, both fall into the same kind of category in terms of price point, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6.7. So let's say anywhere from $6, even $8 million potentially on the market. 26 going to be 27 for Bunting, 25 going to be 26 for Fulton. So you get 2 players that are kind of in that right spot here where you could hopefully find a little bit of the prime of their career coming in. And when you talk about Bunting first here, if you dial it back, you can look 61.7 going back to 2021. 2 years ago, 76.6, which was a really nice number for him. Then a bit of a step back here, 57.6 this past season. So you think about him as a player who potentially has some production inside of him. But what are the expectations going to be if you're allocating $6 to $8 million in free agency for a player like that? You can specifically go in and look at Bunting here. When we think about his stats over those last few seasons, this is a guy who's been a little bit up and down in terms of health, right? 2022, when he had that high PFF grade, only performed in 12 games, only had 5 starts. This past season, where the grade was its worst, and he played his most snaps of his career, unless you go back to 2020, when he played 16 games, 83. That was for Tampa Bay. 81.4% of the snaps this past year for the Tennessee Titans, 771 snaps total. Again, 14 games, 14 played and 13 started, 57 tackles, 42 solo, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 15 assists. But this is a guy that got elevated into the larger role. So you take a little bit of a pause here to say, well, now that you've dialed it back into full-time starter, it got a little bit worse for you. So you may look at him as kind of a high support player rather than an elite player that's going to help you lock things down. Now, relative to an Adoree Jackson, is it still potentially a marginal upgrade? Maybe, but I don't know if you want to commit that kind of money. The nice thing that I love about moments like these when you bring in a new defensive coordinator is you best version of scouting some of these other players and saying, well, how'd you feel about him, right? What did he look like for you? Do you think there's carryover there? Likewise, in a player like Christian Fulton, you're talking about, again, a little bit younger. He just turned 25, or he's about a third of the way through his 25th year. So he'll turn 26 into the season coming up. 4 total years experience here. Now, in the last 3 seasons, or 2 specifically, 11 games, 11 started, so did miss some time. 645, 653, right? Playing in 56 and 68% of the snaps. Had 9 assisted tackles, 13 the year prior, forced fumble, INT. There's something here in terms of right age, right in the sweet spot of maybe he's about to give you a next season, 2 seasons of the best football that he could potentially play in his career. You go back to 2021, 62 targets, only 30 receptions, a 66.1 PFF grade. 2022, 63.8, 58 targets, 33 receptions. And then coming into this 2023 season, which was a down year for the Tennessee Titans overall, got beat up. 46.4 PFF grade, 51 targets, 37 receptions, 39 solo tackles in there as well. So can I look at one of these players and look at that price point, 6 to 8 million, and think, hey, we have needs here, right? If you are the New York Football Giants and you go and look at this, think about their roster and where they currently stand inside of the secondary specifically, we're talking about a team that is going to have, we said Adoree Jackson, right? He's going to go to market here. He's 28, going to be 29 years old in the upcoming season. He's earmarked for 11.3 million, by the way, over on SPOTTRACK, or whatever it's worth, right? So even if you think that the production or where these players are or is relatively close, the Adoree Jackson, time looks cresting down. Maybe a player like Christian Fulton is about to hit whatever the best version of it is and coming off of a really down season for himself. But the New York Giants have a lot to sort out here, right? I said Adoree Jackson, unrestricted free agent in Darnay Holmes, Nick McLeod, restricted free agent, So you have 3 cornerbacks inside of that room that are going to be up for contracts. We mentioned Xavier McKinney, obviously, as well. So where is this team headed, and how are you going to offer a little bit of stability inside of that room really matters as well. One other player that I wanted to spotlight here, too, is linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. Now, can we have 2 Azeezes on the roster? That's debatable, right? But here's a player, tongue-in-cheek, 64.8 PFF grade this past, that's 2021. He backs it up in 2022 with a 67.8. And then this past season, 2023, another 64.7, and gave you 108 total tackles in this season as well. So there are some nice numbers here from that standpoint. Where is the value, though, on a player like this relative to already having Bobby Okereke in your system and feeling like, spend on the market, though SPOTTRACK doesn't give anything in terms of predicting where his market is going to be for Shaair, drafted in 2019 by the Niners, by the way. You have to at least think that a player like this just brings more value to your team. I'm assuming 1 year here, by the way. So if you talk about bone connection, a 1-year stopover, a quote, prove it contract. Well, guess what? Played all 17 games, right? Started 16 of them, over 1,000 snaps, 163 tackles, 84 solos, 79 assisted. So here's a guy that said at 26 years old, I'm about to go get myself a payday, and I believe that he will. So he's likely a player, one, that doesn't necessarily have multiple seasons with Shane Bowen as the defensive coordinator to say maybe we pull him from free agency. He's also a guy I think is probably going to price himself out probably from the Giants range here, regardless of role, regardless of where he fits into it. Scheme-wise, there is plenty of 3-4 tenants built into Shane Bowen and what he's done over the past handful of seasons. Again, I say tenants because Wink Martindale was a guy that would give you a lot of different looks. And that's the part that I think I find most fascinating here. We're going to get a pretty strong sense, I think, in the short term in the agency about understanding, one, how the Giants perceive their defensive side of the ball to be, because I can tell you that they need more help at defensive tackle. I can tell you that they need an additional edge rusher. We mentioned a guy like Bryce Huff. I can tell you that they need help in the secondary at both the cornerback and potentially the safety position, depending on what happens with Xavier McKinney. I can tell you that there is a need for 5 players on the defensive side of the ball, including linebacker depth as well. And maybe 3 out of those 5 need to be guys that you look at and say, oh, these are high-level contributors. These are, 65, 70, 75% of the snaps contributors that we need to have on this roster. It is what makes things a little bit tricky. A guy like Bobby Okereke, under contract, breakout player, starting to get some sleeper buzz in terms of where his value is, and the Giants may have a real feel on that contract. He played every single snap. So did Xavier McKinney. So there's a little bit of a double down here in terms of, is price point right for a player like that? Hey, we'll wait and see. But you're losing 100% snap coverage. So replacing that is more than just, do we think we have a young player? Do we think they're in free agency? It's also about every single week, when we looked on the defensive side, check the box. Xavier McKinney goes out and plays. Bobby Barricade goes out and plays, right? It's why Azeez Ojulari is the guy that we circle and say, hey, whether it's been injury and then when healthy, production, there's a multiple layers here that suggest we can't go into this season thinking that he's going to be the guy that gets us across the line. Ultimately, Shane Bowen hired as the New York Football Giants defensive coordinator. We'll cover again this week as well where we stand when it comes to a guy like Mike Kafka. Obviously, got multiple interviews for the head coaching spot in Seattle. They went a different route, but then circled back to Mike Kafka saying they wanted to get him in for the OC. That was blocked by the New York Football Giants. Is a result of saying we believe in Kafka, we want him here, or is that a result of we cannot have every single coordinator underneath Brian Daboll leave via firing, parting of ways, disgruntled, or simply wanting a different opportunity? So there is this interesting dynamic right now. The fact that the Giants got a quality hire in Shane Bowen hopefully speaks to the fact that, listen, Brian Daboll may have his personality archetype, but there are other coaches around the league that come in, feel like they can get on the same page and feel like they can be productive, right? And it could be a nice step forward here. Shane Bowen may be looking at it as saying 1 or 2 seasons, and you hate to have that much turnover, but 1 or 2 years underneath Brian Daboll as the DC in New York with some talented players, well, I may be able to showcase how I move the needle with this unit. Mentioned at the top there, right? A lot of back of the league rankings for the New York Football Giants. If he takes this team and makes it a middle of the pack defense, well, then you could be talking about elevating himself into some head coaching opportunities. So whatever combination of elements gets you there is what matters most. The Giants check off the box, they get their defensive coordinator, and they'll look to move themselves forward this offseason now knowing here is our play caller. Here's the guy that's going to run this unit. What tweaks do we need to make to our roster to make sure that he has the highest value on the field for himself going forward? We'll break all those things down as we work our way through this week and work our way towards, yes, the big game. Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers. Andy and I will be back on Friday making those predictions and those bets, but we'll have an episode between there because I do want to go not only a layer deeper on the defensive side of the ball. We haven't done our full preview of free agents for the New York Football Giants. I'm going to be here this week because I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. Talk about the cap, where they want to allocate that money, and what is the best version of construct quality team on the defensive and offensive side of the ball heading into the 2024 season. In the meantime, we remind you one last time, go over to manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping when you use our exclusive promo code OGP24. This is not only good for you to get somebody on some great products and prepare yourself for a little romance around Valentine's Day. It's really important for us. Supporting our sponsors supports our show. So if you're in the market range for a groomer, for a cologne, for some lip balm, get over to manscaped.com. Use our exclusive code OGP24. Get yourself 20% off, free shipping. Support yourself and help support us on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, on Twitter at One Giant Podcast, at Adam Armbrecht, and at Andy Mac 214. We appreciate you guys as always. Get us on any of those podcast feeds. And until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and we here demand the people know, as always, let's go Big Blue.